Good morning dear students and welcome to Genesis. In today's lecture I am mainly going to cover the phases of photosynthesis and what happens to the end products of photosynthesis. So before we start, let's just chop down the information that we already know about photosynthesis. We know this is a very important process because by this the plant produces glucose, and this glucose is going to be utilized by the plant for its survival and is indirectly utilized by other forms of life. Where exactly this process takes place, in which part of the plant body? It takes place in the leaves. Where in the leaves? Because in leaves we know there are layers: upper epidermis, palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll, lower epidermis. So mainly the concentration of chloroplast, which if you remember is the organelle that is necessary for trapping solar energy. So photosynthesis is practically impossible without this. So the concentration of this organelle is more in the palisade mesophyll layer of the leaves. So out of all the layers that you know, maximum photosynthesis will happen here in the palisade mesophyll. Why? Because they have more number of chloroplast. And what exactly is present inside the chloroplast that makes it so important for photosynthesis is the pigment called chlorophyll pigment. Now if I have to write down the reaction of photosynthesis, how is it going to look? So the photosynthesis involves the addition of carbon dioxide with water in presence of sunlight. But now I am not going to mention sunlight, rather I am going to mention the smallest unit of sunlight, which is known as photon. Okay, so it is the unit of light energy and is known as photon. To absorb this photon, what do you need? Chlorophyll pigment. So this is another important requirement for photosynthesis. So carbon dioxide, water, photon and chlorophyll. What will be produced? Okay, C6H12O6, which is glucose, plus there will be production of water, plus there will be production of oxygen gas. And this oxygen gas is going to be liberated outside the plant body. That means it's removed from the plant body. Now, what is C6H12O6? This is glucose. What is this? This is water. And what is this? This is oxygen. So total how many end products do you see? There are 3 different end products that are produced during the process of photosynthesis. You have to remember this because later on in the class I am going to explain what exactly happens to each of these. Now the last part is, what if I have to balance the reaction? So to balance the reaction, there are 6 molecules of carbon dioxide that combine with 12 molecules of water to produce 1 molecule of glucose, 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of oxygen. So this is the total balanced equation of photosynthesis. During this, what have I mentioned? Photosynthesis is important because खाना बनाता है plant अपने लिए, हम सब के लिए by this process. Second, ये होता कहाँ है? It takes place in the leaves of the plant. Leaves में कौन से layer में ज़्यादा photosynthesis होता है? In the palisade mesophyll. Spongy mesophyll में क्या होता है? If you remember, it is responsible for diffusion of water in the form of water vapor. इसके बाद आता है कि chloroplast कहाँ पे ज़्यादा concentrated है? Palisade mesophyll में. Chloroplast में ऐसा क्या है? It contains that pigment chlorophyll. Why is this pigment so important? Because it can absorb the photons of light which are necessary for this reaction. इस reaction को start करने के लिए what are the 4 essential conditions required? Number 1, there has to be carbon dioxide. How the plant gets carbon dioxide? We already know it is through the stomatal opening that carbon dioxide enters into the plant body. Next is water. Plant को water कहाँ से मिलता है? From the soil. Sunlight we already know, and then finally the chlorophyll pigment which is present in the chloroplast. What are the 3 end products of this reaction? There is production of glucose, there is production of water molecule, and there is production of oxygen gas which is liberated out. That means given out from the plant body. कैसे? Again through that same stomatal opening. Now let us understand that this process of photosynthesis, it happens in 2 phases. So let's understand how these phases operate. Now to understand photosynthesis, we must know the 2 phases in which this reaction takes place. Now remember, the reactions are divided on the basis of the requirement of light. So that phase of photosynthesis which requires light is called the light phase, and that phase of photosynthesis which does not directly require light but requires the products that are produced during the light phase is called dark phase. So never think that this can happen at night or this can happen in absence of sunlight. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. It is just that it directly does not utilize the sunlight. ये utilize करता है उन products को that are getting produced during the light phase. That is why we call it dark phase. There is an alternative name to it जो हमें याद रखना होगा. The light phase is also called the photochemical phase and the dark phase is known as the biosynthetic phase. सबसे पहला difference which you must know about these two phases is one happens in the thylakoid of the chloroplast and the other takes place in the stroma. अगर आपको इसमें confusion है, quickly go and check my reel on the structure of the chloroplast. Clear हो जाएगा at least. So this takes place in the thylakoids and this takes place in the stroma. First phase, light phase में होता क्या है? It has two main subparts. Number one is the activation of the chlorophyll pigment. कैसे activation होता है? By absorption of photons. That means sun के unit को और sunlight को absorb करके they get activated. The pigment gets activated. And once it is activated, what is the next step that is going to happen? Is the splitting of water molecule. The water that the plant has absorbed from the soil is now going to be broken down and break करके produce क्या होने वाला है? It will produce hydrogen, which जिसे हमने कैसे तोड़ा है? Protons and electrons, and there will be production of oxygen gas. So अब हम लोग को समझ में आ गया that during photosynthesis ये जो oxygen gas liberate होता है ये होता कौन से phase में है? होता है light phase में. And कौन से step में होता है? Splitting of water के कारण. इसका मतलब जो oxygen plant release करता है वो पानी को split करके release करता है. Now so this water molecule in presence of the photon is broken down into protons, electrons, मतलब hydrogen, and there is production of oxygen. अब इनका क्या use है? This proton is utilized. If you can look here, the proton and the electron they get utilized to convert NADP. ये क्या है? Full form है nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. It is a coenzyme. और ये coenzyme करता क्या है? ये हाइड्रोजन को अपने साथ अटैच करके gets converted into nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate हाइड्रोजन में कन्वर्ट करता है. इसकी क्या जरूरत है? This is a form of storing energy. जैसे हम ATP जानते हैं वैसे ही एक एसिमिलेटरी पावर है NADPH. This is used in the next process. क्या होता है नेक्स्ट प्रोसेस में? We will discuss afterwards. और ये इलेक्ट्रॉन्स को किस लिए हम यूज करते हैं? These electrons are used to combine इनऑर्गेनिक फॉस्फेट विथ ADP. ADP क्या है? एडिनोसिन डाइफॉस्फेट. डाई मतलब 2. तो अगर एडिनोसिन डाइफॉस्फेट के साथ वी ऐड वन मोर फॉस्फेट तो 3 फॉस्फेट हो गए. सो वी राइट ATP which is adenosine triphosphate. This is the energy currency. We all know, right? This energy and this will be utilized by the plant in the next step. So in the next step which is the biosynthetic phase मतलब कुछ synthesize होता है, यहाँ कुछ बनता है. Let's see क्या बनता है. Here कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड गैस जिसको प्लांट ने एटमॉस्फेयर से लिया है will be reduced to glucose. मैंने reduce क्यों कहा? Because we know reduction तब होता है when you add hydrogen to something. So if you look at this, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड के पास it has carbon and it has oxygen. ग्लूकोज के पास कार्बन है, ऑक्सीजन है. What is extra that it has? Hydrogen. That means when you add hydrogen to carbon dioxide it gets reduced. So we are reducing carbon dioxide to produce the final product of photosynthesis which is glucose. लेकिन इस चीज को accomplish करने के लिए the plant requires energy in the form of NADPH and in the form of ATP. So these are the two forms in which the energy will be utilized by the plant. So indirectly, is this process possible without this step? No, it is not possible. So the products which are produced during the light phase are extremely essential for the dark phase to happen. Now this glucose can be utilized immediately by the plant for its metabolic activity. अगर extra है then it will be stored in the form of starch and it can also be stored in the form of sucrose, and it can also be stored in the form of oil. Now let's understand इन तीनों का मतलब क्या है. Glucose and starch में difference यही है. We already know in the last videos I have already mentioned glucose is a monomer and starch is a polymer. So conversion of glucose into starch, ये जो process है, इस process को कहा जाता है polymerization. So by the process of polymerization, the glucose is converted to starch. Now in some plants, instead of converting glucose directly into starch, they can also keep it in the form of sucrose. Sucrose is not a polysaccharide, it's a disaccharide. So it is made by combining one glucose molecule with one fructose molecule. So this is another way of storing the glucose. And the third way is by producing oil. So basically the glucose which gets produced is utilized in manufacture of oils and proteins for the plant body. So this is how the main end product is stored in the plant body or kept in the plant body. Now let us see what basically happens to all the three end products that are produced in the photosynthesis, which are glucose, water and oxygen. Three end products of photosynthesis, they are number one, glucose. Now this glucose can be stored in the form of starch. It can be utilized then and there for its own metabolism. I am not mentioning it here. Second, it can be stored in the form of sucrose, and third, it can be used for production of proteins and fats. So these are the four things actually that can happen to glucose. One is utilization then and there, then is in the form of starch it is stored, sucrose, and used in the production of protein and fat. Now the food that is produced, which is glucose, if it is stored in the form of starch, remember starch is insoluble. So if it is insoluble, it cannot be transported to different parts of the body, because food is prepared in the leaves, but it has to be carried to all the parts of the body. So when it is to be transferred, then starch again is converted back into soluble form of sugar, and then it is transported using, how do we transport it? Through the phloem. And what is that process called, where this manufactured food is converted into soluble form and then dissolved in water and transported through the phloem to different parts of body? That process is called translocation. Please remember. So translocation is that process by which food which is manufactured in the leaves gets converted into soluble form of sugar, dissolved in water, and then distributed to various parts of the plant body through the vascular tissue called phloem. Next is water. Water is reutilized by the plant during the process of photosynthesis. And third is oxygen. We all know partly a part of the oxygen will be used in the process of respiration for the plant, and the other part will diffuse out into the atmosphere. So these are the three end products of photosynthesis, and this is what happens to them. So we are meeting next in my next video. Take care of yourself and do not forget to subscribe and like my channel. Thank you.